So this is a video I've been wanting to make for quite some time, but last time it was Mental Health Awareness Day, the whole thing with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard was kicking off, and I just didn't want to be associated with any of that drama. I didn't want to be saying, oh yes, it's a Men Too campaign. I wanted to tell my own story, and it's not just because it's coming from a man. I think men and women suffer equally with this. In case you haven't figured it out, this is not a comedic episode. If you normally watch with your kids, I would strongly recommend you don't watch this with your kids. I wanted to tell this story because there are a lot of men out there that don't understand domestic violence from a woman's perspective or from a man's perspective. And I also wanted to tell this story because I know there are men out there that are suffering through domestic abuse that probably don't feel that they can leave that situation. So I'll start out by telling my story. I was in a relationship with a girl who I won't name. She appeared in my comments section a year or so ago and said, "Oh, fancy seeing you here." I didn't reply, as you can probably imagine. I just thought that's a person that is no longer in my life, and I pity who she was, and I hope she is doing better. I went for a drink in the pub with her and my sister. She had never hit me, and we'd been together for months. I would never have imagined it would have happened. And I suppose that's the first thing that you need to understand. These things happen out of nowhere. So we have a nice time in the pub, at least I thought we did, and we come home and she's quite drunk. And all of a sudden she starts saying that my sister had said something that she didn't like. And I said, "Well, what was it?" And I think I perhaps iterated to her that maybe there had been a misunderstanding. And she starts calling my sister fairly vicious names out of the blue. And so I sort of say, where's this coming from? And literally, the second the words left my mouth, she had hit me in the temple probably 2 times before the words had finished. And she continued to punch me. And they call it a sucker punch for a reason, because you don't see it coming and you. So I guess I am going to get upset because it's not something that leaves you, I suppose, once you start to relive it. I was in shock, and because you're in shock, you don't know what to do and you can't fight back. If you're a person that says, "Well, a girl could never hit me, I'd be able to stop her," when you're taken by surprise and they hit you repeatedly over and over and over, and if you're a good person, you don't punch that person back. You try to get the fuck away. And I tried to get away from this girl, and I ran into the corridor, and I'd got long hair at the time, and she grabbed me by the hair, and she threw me down onto her dad's sofa, and was berating me and calling me a pussy for being hit by a girl. She was literally drilling that into me. "You're a pussy, you let a girl punch you." And this was out of the blue. This is weird behavior. I don't know where it came from to this day. She had never been like this before. And she gets up and goes to the kitchen, and to this day, again, I have no idea what she was going to fetch from the kitchen, and I wasn't going to wait to find out. And I ran to the front door, and it was locked, and I fumbled to get my keys out of my pocket, and I can hear her running from the kitchen to stop me. And I managed to get out just in time as she's grasping for me. And I got in my car, and I locked the car door behind me, and she was banging on the window, continuing this torrent of verbal abuse that I was a pussy and that I couldn't fight a girl. She left, and my best friend came and picked me up, with me just crying and crying and crying in complete shock and completely confused as to what had just happened to me. I had just become the victim of domestic abuse, is what had happened to me for the first time, and sadly not the last time. When I spoke to this girl on the phone afterwards and I said to her what she had done, she denied it, which is a fairly incredible thing to happen after what you've just been through. But she said it had never happened. And I told her if she didn't own up to what she had done, I would leave. And the first thing that you might ask yourself is, why would you go back to that person? And the answer is very simple. If you want to know why people go back to their abusers, it's because there's nothing else. If you have ever been in a situation where you don't have a lot of money, you will know what it's like when all of a sudden you're faced with, do I go live with my parents? Do I have a friend that I can live with? And if the answer is no, you're stuck there. And so, because you also love this person, you think, well, between love and me not wanting to go and throw myself on the mercy of my mother and my father, you go and you stay with that person. It's as simple as that. On the promise that they won't do it again. And this is what we did. She admitted she'd hit me. She said she would never do it again. And I said, if you do ever do it again, I will leave you. And I thought that would be enough. I thought that she would never hit me again because I had told her, if you do, I'll be gone. I thought love was enough. And I thought I have no other choice. And so I went and I lived with that girl again. It was probably a full year before she next hit me. And again, it was entirely out of the blue. And this time, I thought if I go limp, she will stop hitting me because she will feel like a monster. If she thinks she's hurt me, she won't keep hitting me. And that is not the case. I can tell you now that's not the answer. If you go limp and that person is in enough of a blind rage, they just hit you and hit you and hit you. She slammed my head into the wall and I thought I would lose consciousness. She went to the kitchen cupboards and she pulled plates out and started smashing them on the floor. This was an angry, angry person that was not capable of handling their emotions. And for some reason, maybe once a year, it would come out of them in such a way that I would be physically abused. I didn't leave her. I still didn't leave her. My friends told me, you have to get out. And I said, well, where am I going to go? And they said, oh, well, I haven't got room. And the option was to go back to my parents, which I absolutely should have done. But I couldn't bring myself to admit that I needed them because I was a young man and I was trying to be a young man and I did not want to go and live with my parents. So again, I said, if this ever happens again, that will be the end of it. And of course, after the second time of me saying this, it's an empty threat and she knows it's an empty threat. And it wasn't long before she went for me again. The third time, I smashed a glass on the table because I saw her coming. She didn't sucker punch me this time. And I told her, if you hit me again, I am going to kill you. I am going to put this glass through your throat. I will kill you if you try and hit me again. And she burst into laughter and made out like it was no big deal. And I guess that's what bullies do when they're threatened themselves and when they think they actually can't get away with what they're going to do. They turn it into, I wasn't really going to do it. She was going to do it. From then on, that girl only damaged items of property. She smashed plates frequently. We must have been going through so many plates at one point. It was just ridiculous. And she continued to be very, very angry, and she continued to scare the living hell out of me. Just because they're no longer hitting you doesn't mean you aren't being abused. I was terrified all of the time that I was living there because she was so frequently in a fit of rage. I can't stress enough, don't get violent in return. When I smashed that glass on the table, it was an instinctive thing and it wasn't safe for anybody. It wasn't a good idea to try to match violence with violence. I should have just left long before it even got to that stage. If you're in this situation, please don't think that I am telling you to be violent in return and that'll end the violence. It worked out for me in the end. It might not work out for you. You might end up with a murder charge. You might end up with this person killing you because they overpower you and stick you with a glass. Don't do what I did. Mine was instinctual. Don't do what I did. If you're in this situation now, you need to get out of it. You need to go and find a good person. And I'm not saying go get into another relationship. I'm saying find a friend that will take you. Go back to your parents. For God's sakes, if you're feeling like, oh, I have too much pride, fuck your pride, go back to your parents. Because if you keep staying in that relationship, it will do you serious, serious harm. Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. You will be harmed, perhaps forever, if you stay there long enough. I am thankful to the bottom of my heart that I have managed to move on from that place. I used to duck in the early days of my relationship with Nisha if she raised her hand because I was afraid she was going to hit me. And it's ridiculous because that girl would never hit me. That girl would never hit me. I'm better now, and I'm lucky that I am better. When it finally is over, you have an awful lot of recovering to do, and it is so much harder than the hardship you'll be going through. to just get yourself somewhere safe and be safe going forwards and rebuild your life. Rebuilding your life is easier than picking yourself back up at the end of this relationship. You're perhaps thinking, well, what did you do? How did you get out? I didn't. I wasn't strong enough, and I wish I had been. And I wish someone had told me the damage that that relationship was doing to me and the hardship that I would face coming to terms with what that relationship had done to me. Because I left that situation feeling completely destroyed because that girl left me for another man. The girl that I loved, the girl that I had let physically abuse me over the course of 3.5 years, abandoned me for somebody else. And that hurt just as much. And that felt like the same level of emotional abuse that the physical abuse had done to me. It was the same feeling all over again, but it was a feeling that lasted forever. I still feel undignified. I feel like my dignity was robbed because not only did that girl get away with what she did, she left me for another man. She just entirely betrayed my loyalty. If you're in this relationship, please get out of this relationship. It's not worth it.